For months, Jungkook had been running on autopilot, performances, rehearsals, interviews, flights, and the constant glare of cameras. His life looked perfect from the outside. The fame, the applause, the endless love from millions. But deep inside, he felt something slipping away, the quiet moments, the stillness, the part of himself that once found joy in simply being. When the world was busy watching, he quietly booked a flight, not to another concert venue, not to another recording studio, but to Qatar. A place far from everything familiar. A place where he could breathe again. The moment he stepped out into the warm desert air, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The golden sun bathed everything in calm light. There were no flashing cameras, no screams, just the wind, the sand, and the sound of his heartbeat. For the first time in months, Jungkook smiled without effort. He wasn't performing. He was simply living. Behind his calm exterior, Jungkook carried the invisible scars of pressure, the kind that doesn't show in photos or interviews. The constant demand to be perfect. The fear of disappointing fans. The loneliness that came from being surrounded by millions, yet feeling misunderstood. Qatar became more than a destination. It was a mirror. Each quiet night under the desert sky forced him to face himself, the exhaustion, the fear, and the question he'd avoided for too long. Am I still happy doing this? He found peace in the little things, watching the sunrise, sipping coffee by the sea, writing lyrics that no one would hear. It was in those fragile, private moments that Jungkook began to heal. There's something about the desert. Its silence can be louder than any stage. As he walked along the dunes, Jungkook realized that he didn't need to escape from something. He needed to return to himself. The boy who once sang with pure passion before fame complicated everything was still there, buried beneath the layers of expectation and duty. And in Qatar's stillness, that boy's voice started to whisper again. He began writing. Not for charts, not for fans, but for his own heart. Every line was a confession. Every melody a breath of freedom. Days turned into weeks. The noise in his mind grew softer, replaced by clarity. Jungkook knew he couldn't stay forever. The stage was still waiting, and so were millions of hearts, but this time, he wouldn't return as the same person. He would carry the silence of Qatar with him. The peace, the lessons, and the understanding that even stars need to rest, to feel, to heal. When he boarded his flight back home, he wasn't running away anymore. He was returning with purpose, and maybe, just maybe, that's what he needed all along. Not an escape, but a rediscovery. The sound of the airplane engines filled the cabin, but Jungkook's mind was quiet. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the familiar anxiety that usually came with returning home. Qatar had changed something in him. He looked out the window, clouds drifting by like memories, and thought about everything he had felt during his time away. The loneliness, the stillness, and the small, quiet happiness that came from simply existing without pressure. When the plane landed in Seoul, the city lights felt brighter than ever. The fans were waiting as always, cameras flashing, voices calling his name. But this time Jungkook's smile wasn't forced. It was genuine, peaceful, grounded. That he bowed, waved, and whispered softly to himself, "I'm ready again." Back in the studio, the air felt different. He no longer rushed through songs just to meet deadlines. He listened to every note, every beat, every word. His voice carried something new. Not just power but emotion. The kind that comes from living through silence, from knowing what it means to almost lose yourself. The staff noticed. The members noticed. Even Army noticed. There was something deeper in his eyes, something that couldn't be described. As if Qatar had carved peace into his soul, he began writing new lyrics late at night, words that spoke of solitude, freedom, and self-discovery. One of his drafts read, "Even in the quiet, I'm not alone, because I've learned to hear my heart again." The first time Jungkook stepped back on stage, it was overwhelming. The lights hit him, the crowd screamed, and for a second he felt that familiar rush, but this time it didn't consume him. It lifted him. He wasn't performing to meet expectations, he was performing to share what he had found, the calm after chaos, the peace after pressure. Every movement, every lyric, every breath carried a new kind of energy, raw, honest, alive. During one encore, as the lights dimmed and the audience waved their ocean of purple light sticks, Jungkook closed his eyes and smiled. For once, he didn't feel like a performer trapped by perfection. He felt like a man who had finally come home to himself. Days turned into months. Fans began to notice the change. He was quieter, But more sincere, he spoke less, but when he did, his words carried weight. In one live broadcast, he said softly, "Sometimes you have to go far away, not to escape but to find where you truly belong." The chat exploded with hearts and tears because everyone knew exactly what he meant. Now, whenever he performs, there's a certain glow in his eyes, the same warmth that reflected off the Qatari sunset. He learned that peace isn't found in perfection, but in presence, and no matter how loud the world becomes, Jungkook carries the silence of Qatar within him, a reminder that even the brightest stars need darkness to shine. Months after returning from Qatar, Jungkook's world looked the same: bright lights, long rehearsals, and endless schedules, but inside, everything had changed. The peace he found in those quiet desert nights still lingered in his heart. Whenever the noise of fame grew too loud, he closed his eyes and remembered the wind that brushed against his face, the silence that healed his thoughts, the sun that set slowly over the endless dunes. That memory became his anchor. It began to shape his music. The lyrics he wrote carried whispers of that stillness, the kind of peace that comes after storms. Each song felt like a conversation with his past self, the boy who once struggled under the weight of perfection, and the man who now understood the power of letting go. In one of his unreleased demos, he wrote, "Even the desert blooms after the rain, so I'll bloom too, quietly but fully." Jungkook once sang about dreams, love, and youth. Now he sang about peace, purpose, and truth. The journey had changed him, from a boy chasing perfection to a man embracing imperfection, from someone afraid of silence to someone who found meaning within it. Every step he took on stage now carried the weight of that growth. Every smile he shared felt real. Every pause between songs wasn't emptiness, it was presence. He had learned that healing doesn't happen in front of millions. It happens quietly. In the moments when no one is watching. Years later, fans would still talk about that trip to Qatar. The photos of Jungkook walking along the coast, his eyes soft, his smile peaceful, they became symbols of rebirth. To some, it was just a vacation, but to those who understood, it was something far deeper. A reminder that even the brightest stars must rest, reflect, and rediscover themselves before they can shine again. And perhaps that's the true legacy of Jungkook's time in Qatar. Not just the peace he found there, but the courage he gained to carry that peace into the chaos of his world. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than applause, and Jungkook finally learned to listen. Fame had never truly left Jungkook. Even as he tried to live quietly, the world followed his every step. Every photo, every glance, every word he spoke. But the difference now was within him. He no longer feared the eyes of the world. He had learned to see beyond them, to look inward. The fire that once burned with anxiety now burned with purpose. He poured that energy into creation. Late nights in the studio became sacred. Not a burden, but a ritual. He worked not for perfection, but for truth, blending his emotions into melodies that sounded like whispers from his soul. Every lyric became a bridge, connecting the boy who once struggled in silence to the man who had found peace in the desert. One evening, Jungkook sat alone by his window, notebook in hand, city lights shimmering below. He began to write. Not songs this time, but letters to his past self, to his future self, to the parts of him that still carried doubt. "You don't have to be everything for everyone," he wrote. "You just have to be you, and that's enough." It was the kind of self-compassion he'd once thought he didn't deserve. But now, after everything he knew, even the strongest hearts need softness. These letters later inspired a new creative vision, not just as an artist, but as a storyteller of his own healing. When Jungkook finally released his next project, fans noticed something different immediately. The songs weren't loud or flashy, they were calm, filled with warmth, honesty, and vulnerability. In one track, he sang softly, "In the silence, I found my voice again." Listeners felt it. Every note carried the weight of his journey, from exhaustion to rebirth, from chaos to calm. It wasn't just music anymore. It was a reflection of his soul. Critics called it his most mature work yet. But to Jungkook, it was simply real. As his music touched millions, something unexpected happened. Fans began sharing their own stories of burnout, healing, and rediscovery. His quiet strength had inspired others to pause, breathe, and take care of themselves too. What started as one man's private journey had become a circle of light, a ripple of calm spreading across hearts around the world. And perhaps that was always the purpose of his silence. Not to hide from the world, but to return to it stronger, softer, and more human than ever before.